Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 19th of October 2022, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G7URP. Lovely to see you. On tonight's show, Gary W9XT joins us live from America to tell us about antennas, the third dimension. We're pleased to bring news of our first in-person amateur radio foundation course since 2020. And we find out what on earth this is. Oh, this is a good one. I've done some research on this. Anyway, if you know what that is and you haven't already submitted a question, a suggestion or an answer, then you've just got time to do that on BATC or Facebook, and we'll read your entry out with others as well. But first, we've got quite a bit of club news. And Norfolk Amateur Radio Club, as you may have seen in our newsletter, were awarded 2 trophies at the RSGB convention the weekend before last. The Newbury Trophy for winning the local club section of last year's Autumn Series contest, and the G5RV Trophy for winning the year's local club section of the club championships. This reflected another tremendous effort by Norfolk Amateur Radio Club's contest team, and coming on the back of second place in the high power section of SSB as well. And NARC has already obtained a substantial lead in the halfway stage in this year's Autumn Series. But I know that all the contestants would say to you, don't give up, don't give up. We need every point we can. The next contest, by the way, is next Thursday, the 27th of October, and it's SSB. Well done to everybody. Congratulations to the whole contest team. I know some of them there to receive the award. I couldn't find a picture of it yet. I don't think they've published it yet, but I'm sure we'll see a picture as well in due course. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the programme, we're very, very pleased to announce that we are bringing you our first foundation course, in fact our first course since that terrible time of March 2020. We were about to run a course actually in April. In fact, I think the following weekend, just after we were put in lockdown, it was something like that. And of course, things haven't really been stable enough to do something like that. And of course, many people have gained their licenses by doing it completely online, which is fine. And we're very pleased that they have. But I know that some people have been waiting for a real in-person course. Although we don't have too many people on that list, we certainly have a few places for others as well. So this is a serious message. You do not have to be a NARC member. You can be anywhere in Norfolk, or anywhere indeed, to come and do this course. I'm going to give you the dates now. That's Saturday, the 12th of November, and the following Saturday, the 19th of November. So not very long at all, just under a month before it starts, in fact. I'll have all the details of how you can book, but you need to email me if you haven't already got your details, or if you know someone else who has, please tell them to contact me as soon as possible, because we haven't got too long to do this. Now, one other thing I'd just like to tell you, and this, by the way, these both will be at the City of Norwich School, our usual venue, for 6 hours between 9 and 3. Slightly shorter days, but quite a lot to do. The first day will be mainly to cover most of the theory. The second day will be some revision, and then we'll end up doing the exam there. Or if you prefer, you'll be able to do the exam at home, at your own time, in your own time, at your own leisure. All right, there'll be a small cost for the course, and frankly, that depends on how many people we get to do it. The club will subsidise a bit of the cost as well. But, I don't know at the moment whether I'm going to get 2 people or 12 people. But this is a great opportunity to do it. I don't know when we'll next be running one. I'm sure we will, but it won't be certainly until 2023. So please let me know, radio@dcpmicro.com, for anybody who's interested in doing a real foundation course and getting their license well before Christmas. Another bit of news for you is that our Christmas dinner party, and I have mentioned that we were going to do this, but it is definitely going to be on Wednesday the 14th of December. And it's going to be at the Village Inn Carvery and Restaurant in Little Melton. We have been there before for our dinners. We're combining a dinner and a party because we feel that probably we can do more of that and have a proper meal, a 3-course meal and everything at the restaurant, and we'll have a few party games and things as well. The cost is just going to be £10 per head because the club is going to subsidise it, and that's for a 3-course meal. And you'll be able to book, we'll have to book your meal in advance as well. Now, I'll give you more details of that. I hope to get an application form out next week on the newsletter. If you're not already signed up for the NARC newsletter and you'd like to come to this, then please sign up for it on our website beforehand, and you'll get it as an attachment on next week's newsletter. But I just want to bring those details as soon as I could. So it'll be £10 a head, not just members, but their family, or bring a friend or two if you wish. All right, I hope that'll be well supported. Now, if you're interested in amateur television, as some people are, or you're interested even in satellites with the QO100 and things, then the British Amateur Television Club are running their convention this weekend, the Part 2, CAT 22 Part 2. It's online, and it's between 10 and 3 o'clock British summer time. And it's available to you even if you're not a member of the BATC. If you want to see what it's all about, you can watch it by following this link here. That's if you're watching this now on the BATC streamer, it's actually just another one of the links on there. So if you look at the BATC streamer, if you don't take a note of this link in time, you can look at it there. Tammy and I are kind of hosting it for the club. You'll just see us pop up a couple of times just introducing people really. But we've offered to do that in the same sort of way as we've done for the RSGB and indeed, of course, our club here as well. But hopefully if you're interested at all in amateur television and the way it's come forwards with digital work as well, and you don't have to spend a fortune to do it, then have a look at that convention. That's this weekend, Saturday 10 till 3.
I was just thinking, you said you'll see us, but I was thinking, I hope you won't see me unless there's a big disaster.
You see your arm sometimes.
You might see my arm, yeah.
All right. All I'm doing is introducing really though, and sort of continuity and things like that. We're sort of hosting it all from here though, on the web. Now, back to some of your news. And Bob, G6PWS, these wonderful pictures that he sent us before, he sent us some more. Have a look at these. Unfortunately, Bob, unless I've missed something and Tammy's missed something, we haven't seen a caption, so I don't know what sort of bird this is. I'm sure there are many smart people watching this and they'll know.
Yeah, that's naive of us to not know.
It is not naive, but this has been a bit of a rush tonight anyway. And there we are. Some wonderful pictures and some more. That's a white one. I'm good, aren't I? I'm sorry, I'm very ignorant. And we joined the RSPB earlier in the year.
Some kind of stalk, but I'm not really sure. So that's nice. I do know what the next one is, though.
Oh yes, kingfisher.
A kingfisher. I have got some video of the kingfisher as well. Look at him. Lovely, isn't it? They're so small as well. You don't realise how small
they are. I don't think I've ever seen one in real life.
It's just like to see this blue whoosh go past.
If you know what those other birds were, or an egret, apparently.
An egret.
So I knew someone
okay,
with Stuart M0JKB said it was an egret, one of those other ones. Lovely bit of video. Thank you very much, Bob, for sharing that. To be honest, I know we haven't been here for 2 weeks, but we haven't had much more news from you at home, you members. So if it's all right, we'll just be a little bit self-indulgent and tell you something that Tammy and I did yesterday. We went to Daventry. As you probably know, many years ago, I worked for the BBC as a freelance and did some presenting and things, and that entitles me to join the BBC Amateur Radio Group, which is open for any current or previous employee of the BBC. And they've done some lovely things this year, of course, because of the 100th anniversary. And yesterday, as you may have seen on other news channels, it was the 100th anniversary of when the British Broadcasting Company, as it was known originally, was formed. Well, we went to Arqiva's premises, which was a transmitter site in Daventry yesterday. Now, Arqiva, as they say on their website, they may be the largest company that you've never heard of. But they're the company now that runs nearly all the transmitter sites for not just BBC, but all of the main broadcasters in this country. And it's over 1,000 sites that they manage. But we went to this one in Daventry. Actually, we've got some pictures for you. So we're going to show you this first. Now, this is a picture. This is not one we took. This is actually on the QRZ page for a call sign called G2LO. You may not have heard of that, but you would have heard probably of 2LO. It was a very famous call sign, the first call sign that the BBC used in 1932. But this was the transmitter hall at Daventry. And the reason they picked this place in Daventry, these were for the first big national long wave, or short wave as we'd call it, I guess, transmissions. And this is where this was. And now we're going to show you another picture of what it looked like yesterday. So they've turned that transmitter hall into a very nice conference centre, but it's much the sort of same in the spirit of it and everything. And members of Arqiva Radio Club and also the BBC Amateur Radio Group were there yesterday to celebrate this, and we ran a special event station. The actual, by the way, I should point out in case anybody's thinking, that's not right, that's not when they started. You're right, that didn't start transmitting from there, the Empire rooms, until 1932. The first transmissions, and indeed 2LO, started from Savoy Hill in those earlier days. Tammy, you've got some more pictures, I think. We just took a picture. We went on a lovely tour of the site, And there were many, many masts up there years ago. And all that's left now are some of these concrete, massive bases and the stanchions and the, what were they called? The cords? What are they called?
Like
The stays, yeah. These things are the things that supported the stays. And there were lots of them. It was a fantastic day, weather-wise. Hopefully it was in Norfolk as well, but it was really wonderful. There's hardly a cloud in the sky, as you can see. And we walked around for a tour of this. Now, the reason I took a picture of this building, is this was one of the original BBC coats of arms above this building that we were in. This was called the Empire Building. And then this one, I know you wouldn't normally take a picture of a drain, but I just happened to notice it. Now, I hope you can see that at home. If you look, there's the original BBC logo there, which is a backwards B next to a forwards normal B, and then a big C over the three of them. And that was their first logo. And they're on the drain things there. They've not taken them down, which is wonderful to see. That's all around that building. And I know you don't hear me on the radio very much. I know what you've done here, Tammy. I didn't realise you were going to do this, but I did manage 5 or 10 minutes of operating this G2LO station, and this is a short video that Tammy was apparently doing. Although it says
you're similar here actually.
It says GB100 BBC there, but actually
by the way, is SP
on the other side of that was G2LO because they alternated with the call signs which they were running. And the other nice thing was the guy sitting next to me is called Nick Garrett, and he is someone I first knew 28, maybe even 30 years ago at BBC in Cambridge, where I started, and he started. We're a similar age within a couple of years. He was an engineer, I was a presenter producer, and we knew each other really well then, and we hadn't met each other for about 25 years. Oh, that's my face.
Your face is a picture in this because you couldn't work out what
Oh, that was the pile-up, wasn't it? I mean, when you had the BBC state call sign here, GB100 BBC, it was a bit of a pile-up. But that, thanks to, I'm going to name him, Chris Danby actually, and Andy, they gave us a really good clue of how to do this. They pick them out. They pick out two. They said if you can hear two letters and the same accent, the same name, then just read those two back. And that's how only reason I managed. I only did it for 10 minutes. Some people had half-hour slots booked. Anyway, it was a great experience. Self-indulgent, I know, but we thought we'd share that with you to tell you what we were doing. But do let us know what you do. We'd love to hear your news as well, radio or not radio related. Actually, talking of that, Tammy, you've got some news, I think, about something that's coming up.
I have. Well, I happened to see this on Facebook. I knew it was coming up, but I thought I'd just tell everybody, just in case they didn't know. There's a partial solar eclipse next Tuesday, and this was put on by the Brecklin Astronomical Society, which is obviously in our village. And I just thought it was a quite easy thing to see. So it's going to be really partial here. As you can see, it's only sort of like the top corner that's going to disappear. But the time's out. I've highlighted the Norwich one. So it starts at 10:07. The sort of maximum is going to be at 11 o'clock. This is AM, by the way, in the morning. Okay. So 11 AM, just before noon. And then it finishes just before noon, 11:55. So
basically in Norfolk, if you're watching us from here, that will be between about 10 and midday.
Yeah, so about 11 is how sort of, much or least you're going to see.
And we shouldn't say...
So it'll probably be cloudy.
I know most of you are going to know this, but there may be young people watching these. Obviously, never, ever look at the sun. But there are lots of safe ways of doing that. If you look online, you'll find a safe way of doing that. So thanks for that. I didn't know there was going to be a solar eclipse coming up.
Yep, next Tuesday.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Tammy. So as I said, please keep in touch with what you're doing. I know we don't meet every week now, but we do love to hear what's going on in your life, and we share it with others. And I think that's what hopefully has kept the club connected over these last couple of years. Send it to this address, radio@dcpmicro.com. radio@dcpmicro.com. Generally, if you can get it to us by the Wednesday of transmission, we won't be meeting here now for another 3 Wednesdays, so 2 weeks' time. Then we'll try and include it on that night's show. Okay. Now to the competition before we meet our tonight's guest.
What about Little People?
Oh, Little People, sorry. I'm so sorry.
People.
I think it's the first time I've ever missed that. I turned the page over.
It's because we had such a disaster during Little People last time.
Was it?
We invaded, didn't we, last time?
Oh, that's right, yes. Yeah,
Here's
we
the
may
Little
not mention
People.
those. Sorry, Tammy.
This is called wireless ducks. Do you know what those are?
No.
The ducks?
Oh, earbuds.
AirPods.
Or AirPods, yeah.
Cool,
how they turn the duck bit, yeah.
They just put
really
little
cool.
moulding on the top. And then the CD's the water. It's pretty cool, isn't it?
That took me a little while, I must say. And it's on a CD.
Yeah, water.
And when you said wireless ducks, I was looking for the CD and seeing what I've missed. That is lovely. As I always say, miniature-calendar.com. They have a new picture every day, and Tammy picks one out for us. But have a look on there for some entertainment, engineer, and Japanese. The Japanese website that does this fantastic stuff. It's a long, long time since we discovered that, and that you discovered that. A couple of years at least, I should think.
I can't remember. I'm sure somebody told us about it, but I can't remember now.
It probably is.
Who
Yes.
it was.
Yeah.
It was so long ago. We've been having them.
Good. Just having a look on the message there. Yeah, I'm going to cover the Koblenska in a minute, Malcolm. And Dick, G3WRJ, brother of Jim. Coincidence, but one of my Elmers was G4LO from Northwold in Norfolk. Thank you, Dick, for that.
Cool.
I haven't missed anything else. Can't get the staff and things like that. I shouldn't read the messages and the insults and everything else that come in. Anyway, let's get to that competition because I'm keeping our guests waiting. Now, we showed you this and said, what on earth is this? Heck.
We've had one guest online, and it was John 202WQ said, could it be a Morse key? It doesn't. I did think it did look a little bit like a Morse key, but it looks like a ferocious Morse key.
It's a strange one, isn't it? I think it now because I know what it is. I think it might be an idea to even be able to show us the scale of this thing. But anyway, let me read what you wrote to us.
Do you know how big it is then?
Well, you'll see later on when I explain it. Maybe anyway. So Tom G8XQD, he was the first off the stops and said that it's a ballista for bombing molehills or a golf tee for very long grass.
I'll let you say the next one because I don't know how to pronounce that word.
Yeah, do you know, this is funny. Quickly tell you this, audience. Gordon G0HQJ says, I think it is a trebuchet for launching fish bait. Now, I didn't know how to say that, and I know you're very good at this normally. So in my office this afternoon when I was writing this stuff, I actually went to one of those sites that you can get it to pronounce it. It says trebuchet. And there was a lady's voice saying, trebuchet, trebuchet. And I thought, if you hear it, you're going to think I've got a lady in my office. Anyway, carry on.
Dave, G0ELJ, said, is it possibly a very early KOB, which is key on board, Morse key, with some form of shorten switch?
You would think so, Dave. Yeah, that's a very possible. Mike GEY says, is it a vintage skeet thrower, which launches glass balls as targets at shooting events? These were used before skeets changed to the standard disc shape. The four spikes kept the launcher fixed in the ground. It looks as though the arc of the skeet flight could be varied to some degree, as well as glass balls, thin metal balls, pottery clay balls and composition pitch balls, often packed with charcoal, mineral powder or sawdust, gave more spectacular hits. I'll tell you in a minute what it is.
Brian Ramsey says it looks like a kite aerial ground or a lightning arrestor. Don't know, but also can cut the string or wire perhaps in an emergency. Benjamin Franklin springs to mind, no clue why.
That's my guess, yes. I know, this has been a difficult one. Bob G6T PWS says this week's item is a wooden frame used in the game of NARC. They put a wooden ball in the cup and once released, players try to hit it as far as possible. Then he says played mainly up there. I don't know where that up there is, but anyway.
Bruce G4KZT, I think the mystery object is a spell used in the game, a bit like golf in Yorkshire in the 1700s and 1800s. The prongs were pushed into the ground and the ball, or NARC, was placed in the sprung-loaded cup at the top of the picture. When the spring was released, the player had to try and hit the ball as far as they could with a wooden bat.
And John G0MXN says, it's been suggested to me that the object is a model of a ballista, looking at the spring and cup at the end, spikes to fix it in place. However, with absolutely no idea of the size of the object, I can't even make a guess at it. It looks as if there's a release mechanism at the cup end. So all I can suggest, if it's used for throwing things, but what things, I have no idea. A young neighbour jokingly suggested it's a portable bait thrower for fishing. I don't agree, though I know fishermen use catapults to get bait a long way out from the riverbanks. I think it's about time we told you what it was.
Yep.
Thanks for all your entries. It is a NARC and spell. Now, a couple of people got this. Thanks to David Dem6DPZ. It's one of those things when it arrived in our inbox, I thought, oh yeah, that's an intriguing thing. What
so
on
is that
earth?
quite big then?
It is. I mean, to call it a pub game, at first when I saw that, I thought maybe it was something really quite small that you play inside the pub, but it's definitely not. It's something you play out in the garden. And I think if we think about it, Mike came halfway there with his skeet thrower, but actually it's for this thing called NARC and spell. So Bruce got it absolutely right, and so did Bob, actually. Now, at this point, we'd normally try and show you it working or whatever. And I'll be honest, I looked everywhere on the web. There were some very long-winded videos showing you about it. So I think the thing to do in this case...
Google it.
Well, is Google it and have a look yourself. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but there were some things there with copyright on, like from BBC Nationwide and things years ago, and that I just couldn't play them to you. But if you're interested, NARC and spell, NARC with a K and spell, have a look at it. It's fascinating, and I think that's a wonderful example of what you could do. But what on earth is this? Anyway,
I'm just going to come back to us for a second.
Are you?
Yeah, I am, because I want to just quickly do something to the next slide. Just bear with me.
Right. Do you want me to? What do you want me to do?
Yeah,
Whistle?
you can just,
Play the spoons?
Yeah, whistle or something. So.
I don't know what you're doing. Anyway, we always give you these competitions. As I said, if you let us know by 3 o'clock on the Wednesday of transmission of the next NARC Live, which will be in 2 weeks' time. I don't know what Tammy's doing here. Then we'll reveal all to you. I'll tell you what. While Tammy's working on the new competition prize, I'll just quickly tell you what's happening on the Norfolk Amateur Radio Club this
I've done
week.
it.
Oh, you've done it. All right.
Yep.
Okay, we'll quickly go back to that. Then Plan A, which was this.
What on earth is this?
Strange.
I know what this was.
Okay.
Was.
But I had no idea.
Yep.
So there you are. That's a clue. I don't know. Have a good look at that. Think about what it is. Don't put it on Facebook or BATC or anything now. But let us know. That'll be on our newsletter and on Facebook, ready for 2 weeks' time, when we'll see you. No, 3 weeks' time, actually. It is 3, isn't it?
Yeah, because we've got 2 weeks at the school.
Yeah, we've got 2
now.
weeks at the school, yeah. But we'll have plenty of time to enter it. But if you know it now, drop us an email now, radio@dcpmicro.com. So, I really mustn't keep my guests waiting any longer just to tell you what's happening this coming week at Norfolk Amateur Radio Club. This Saturday, we've got the Koblenz Sked with our German friends. Now, this week is slightly earlier. It's going to be at 9:30 British Summer Time. And it's on 7.123 megahertz. The reason we're doing it slightly early is that Marco DM5ML is hoping to be maritime mobile on a Baltic ferry at that time, and he'd love to work as maritime mobile. So he's got a mobile rig. He said, could we start a bit earlier? And I thought, why not?
Yep.
So Malcolm, I guess, will be probably a net controller from 9:30 this Saturday. Everybody's welcome, 7.123 megahertz. It'd be lovely to work him there. On Sunday, we've got the GB2RS News on GB3MB at 7 o'clock. Monday, the Monday Night Net at 7:30 on GB3MB, and at 8:30, the 80 metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. Now, next Wednesday, we meet for real at CNS, but we're going to meet in a different room. The school are using the whole of the front block of the main block of the school. So they've given us a nice new room. In fact, it's a brand new centre, only built about a year ago. It's called the Elgin Centre. And we're going to meet from 7 o'clock as usual. So this is the important thing before I tell you what we're going to do. Please take a note of that. The most important thing is when you drive, most of you guys are going to drive or cycle to the school, don't park in the usual area in the left as you go in the drive. Keep going round to the other side of the back of the school. Now, Tammy's got a plan here that I found that I had from years ago. They haven't got a current one. And if you look at there in the bottom right, or the bottom middle, I guess, you can see where you drive in. And normally we'd park on the left. We want you to carry on straight, drive round to the back. There's a nice big car park round the back there, even bigger car park than the one there, actually, where you see that big star. And then the building where we're going to meet, it says our room for the 26th of October is there, but there'll be plenty of us around there to sort of find you if you want to. And it's a lovely brand new sixth form centre that they've built there. That's where we're going to be for that night, for next week only, one night only, as they say. All right. So please tell everybody else who's going to come, go to the main entrance, just get driving and drive all the way around the back as far as you can. And then we'll be right there. And it's called CW Forever. Now, that's Roger and his team of CW fans are going to be bringing their keys and paddles and all sorts of things. And I encourage you to bring yours as well, to share with everybody the joy of Morse and the different sorts of Morse keys and the different ways that you can use Morse and you can learn Morse and everything. So it's all about Morse keys. And it is a very interesting night. We had a record attendance about 2 or 3 years ago, Roger, it is since he said we did it last. I think it was probably 3 years, 2019. Lots of people. So whether you're interested and you just want to come and have a look at lots of different ways of using Morse and the Morse keys, or if you've got something, particularly if it's something unusual, please bring it along as well. We meet between 7 and 9. Remember, it's the Elgin Centre. right at the back of the school.
Can we bring a NER and spell and see if we can do moss on it?
If anybody's got one, please bring it. Yeah, we'll have to do it outside though to be safe, because I imagine that thing was quite big. Now, just one other thing. The week after that as well, we're also at the school. We're back to our normal room though, the sixth forms, and it's a tabletop sale, which is free for all members to attend, and to either bring and buy, or you can bring and sell all evening. And I've got an extended time of 7 till 9:30 that night. But I'll tell you more about that obviously on the newsletter next week. But this will be the last time we're meeting on NARC Live before then. So next week it's CW Forever, meeting at the back of the school. Then the Wednesday afterwards is a tabletop sale. And that's it. Just to remind you again, please do keep in touch with us and keep in touch with what you're doing. And we've got this card, which we're always happy. There's a greeting card that we're happy to send to anybody who you think will be cheered by it, has got something to celebrate. Maybe they're not feeling too good. We'll send it to anybody anywhere in the world. Just drop it a line of their address. We'll add your name to ours and send it to this address, radio@dcpmicro.com. Now, with humble apologies to our guests, because I estimated that we might be about 10 to 8. It's now nearly 8 o'clock. So, Gary, thank you very much for staying there. I'd love to welcome him now. Gary, W9XT, coming to you from the States. Hello, Gary.
Hi, good afternoon, Eric. Good evening.
Yeah, it's good evening for us. Good afternoon to you. And I'm really sorry to kept you that long, but you did say you were interested to see how we run a club meeting. So
Yes, absolutely.
this is what we've been doing, this sort of thing, over COVID, although we're now meeting, as you know. Now, tonight is all about antennas. I know you're going to give us a talk, this third dimension. I think more or less what you're going to talk about, but I'm going to hand it over to you now. As always, to everybody at home, if you've got any questions or comments or feedback for Gary, please do put it into the comments on either BATC or Facebook, and we'll read them to Gary at the end. But right now, over to Gary for this talk. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to talk about antennas in the third dimension. If you're taking a look at a catalog for a Yagi or some other antenna, and you look at the patterns that they have, they're going to show it to you mostly in the X and Y direction. And you'll be interested in what is the beam width, how many degrees is it, what's your maximum gain. But actually, it's probably just as important, and maybe more important, to know what it is in the vertical axis. But in fairness to the manufacturers, they really can't show that, because it depends on how you install the antenna and how high you put it in your local terrain. And that's what we're going to be covering tonight. So we're going to talk about why the antenna angles are important, what affects those, and what you can do about it. For those that don't know me, which is probably most of you, I've been licensed a little over 50 years. My main radio interests are contesting, DXing, and designing and building equipment. I went to University of Wisconsin, where I majored in ham radio with a minor in electrical engineering. I retired about 5 years ago. Somewhere along the line, I had a home project that got out of control, and the ARL found out about it and asked me to write an article, and somehow I got into the business. And right now, I'm mostly in as low band receive antennas. And I belong to a lot of different organizations, which is why I was interested in how you operate your meetings, because I'm involved in several different clubs. And if you got a map, I'm about 25 miles, which I guess is about, I don't know how many kilometers. I'm sorry, I didn't convert that, northwest of Milwaukee. So a few things. This is based on my operating from my QTH in the Midwest of the United States, but the basic principles are going to apply to you wherever you are in the world. Now, I'm using some software that came from the ARL handbook. The first one is a program called EasyNet, which is an antenna design program. Now, the ARL book version is a limited demo, but Roy recently retired, and he released the full version for free off of his website, which there's no support anymore. And I've been using that program for decades. It's a very good program for antenna modeling. And if you're interested in doing that, you might want to pick up a copy where you can. Now, the other program is called HFTA, HF Terrain Assessment by Dean Straw. And that allows you to put in the profiles of your particular location, the hills and valleys, because that's going to affect how the antenna pattern looks. Now, I didn't think about this until just a few minutes ago. This is based on U.S. Geological Survey terrain profile. but I know it's possible that you can do it by hand from other profiles, train profiles. I'm sure that's available in the UK. It's a little tedious, but there might be somebody that's got some way of converting them. Unfortunately, I didn't think of this in advance, and can't give you a little bit more information on that. So the first question is, what kind of operating activities do you do? If you're in a regional type context, nets, we have a lot of traffic handlers in the United States that are regional, and maybe some HF emergency communications. You want high angles because you want the signal to go up and come down fairly close. If you're a DXer, you're trying to talk to people around the world, so you want the signals to go long distances, so they'll be at low angles. If you're a contester like me, you want to work everybody. You want to work people in domestic contests. You want to work the stations halfway around the world. So you want to cover all the angles. So we're all familiar with the ionosphere, how the signal going into space will be refracted by the ionosphere. It's not reflected as some people think, but it's actually refracted. It goes up there and it bends and bends and bends around. If the conditions are correct, it'll come back to Earth, and we might get multiple hops after that. Now, the amount of ionization in the ionosphere is very, very important. And of course, that depends on how much UV is coming from the sun, which we use the solar flux index or the sunspot number to give us an idea. So for the signal, it goes up at a very high angle or at a high frequency, it takes more ionization for it to come down. If we send the signal up and it's too high, it'll be refracted, but it may not be refracted all the way back down, so it'll go off in space and it's lost. So if we lower the frequency, at some point we get what's called the maximum usable frequency, the frequency of the signal come back down. Now, because the angle is less, it has to be refracted less, lower angles can be refracted at higher frequencies. Now, the worst case as far as frequency and refraction is if you point the signal straight up and come back up. And because now it has to do a 180-degree turn, so it takes a lot of ionization relative to the frequency to get that to come back. And that's called the critical frequency. And typically that'll be around 7 to 10 megahertz. I know we got below 7 megahertz quite a bit during the very low part of the sunspot cycle. So we're sending a signal straight up, it's going to be a lot lower than if we're sending it off at a low angle for long distance. Now, these plots were made with HFTA from W9 to different parts of the world. And the vertical lines show the probability that the path is going to be coming at this angle. So for example, if 20 meters, this is for 20 meters in different continents, by the way, if 20 meters is open to Europe, there's an 11% chance that it's at 9 degrees, and there's different probabilities at different angles. You can see lower, and with higher angles, it's less and less likely that the band is going to be open coming into signal at that angle. Now, these are averaged over an entire sunspot cycle, so they're going to be skewed. If we're at the low part of the sunspot cycle, or if the band is just opening or closing, then typically the signals are going to be at the lower angles. If we're in the middle of a good sunspot cycle, the peak, and a very good opening, then our openings might be at the higher end. But they can occur, as you can see, over a large variety of different angles, depending on the path. And it also depends on the band. These are all from W9 land to Europe. And you can see the patterns are quite different. 10 meters, which is my favorite band, is quite interesting because we have this gap. And then we got these down here. And I know from experience, these only happen at the very peak of the sunspot cycle. So how does that work with our antenna pattern? This is a vertical pattern for a 20-meter 3-element beam at 70 feet. I'm not sure, about 25 meters or so. And we can see we have 2 lobes, and we have some minor lobes off the back, but our main lobe is at a pretty low angle. So if our signal is coming in at this angle, then of course we have the maximum gain, and the signal will be the strongest. And if we have one coming up here, it'll be also very strong. Now this is a pretty high angle, so this is probably not going to be coming from their continent, but it might be coming from, you know, well, for you, it might be coming from Western Europe at a higher angle. But if it's coming, say, from the United States or South America or something, it might be coming in, it seems to be coming at this angle. But you can see that the signals are coming in at these different angles. We lose a lot of signal, 15, 20 dB compared to our maximum signal. So that's why we'd like to match our antenna lobes to the signal that we're trying to receive. So why does this happen? Well, if we transmit from our antenna, the signal goes into the air, but also part of it goes down to the ground and it bounces off the ground. And then those signals at some point will catch up and match. And if they meet and they're in phase, we'll get some gain. And if they're out of phase, they'll null each other out. And if they're completely out of phase, it'll completely be nulled out. So that's what causes our different patterns. And the two key things are the height of the antenna and the terrain below. So a few things to keep in mind. In general, the higher the antenna, the lower the main lobe. Higher antennas will produce multiple loads, and your terrain, of course, will affect the patterns as well. This is a signal for my station here that is based on the terrain around my location. We live in an area called the Kettle Moraine. When the glaciers came, they stopped around here and they left big piles of sand and gravel called moraines. And there's also ice that was underground that melted that caused depressions from the when it melted. And so we have these very steep hills. Some are pretty small, some are pretty tall. And this is the terrain that looks, if I'm looking towards Europe. And we're at about 1,100 feet, which is about, what, 340 or so meters above sea level. But you can see it drops off very, very quickly here, where the hill drops off. This is actually a lake down here. And as we get further away, we've got some big hills. Now this might not look good because, you know, it's a pretty big hill, but the distance here is only like 15 meters from here based on the scale, and this is about 3.5 kilometers away. So the actual angle of this over the horizon is pretty small. So this isn't very, very important. But with my antenna, if it had been on flat ground, the pattern in the vertical would look like this, nice and smooth. But you can see that most of the angles towards Europe from here are going to be in areas that aren't going to help us any. But because of the hill, I mean, you can almost think of this as an extension to my tower. This gets skewed up, so it's a lower angle, but of course it's very bumpy, and that's because this is not even terrain. Now I kind of got interested in this because got going on 6 meters and was trying to work DX on the multi-hop and sporadic E that we get in the summer. And my friends were able to work Japan. We would get maybe 3 or 4 openings in Japan and in the late afternoon, early evenings during the summer. Each year we'll get a few of them. And they were telling me, yeah, I worked 20 JAs last night. And I think I said, yeah, I called CQ. And I had them call, there were 3 or 4 deep calling me. And in 3 summers, I did not succeed in working in a single JA, even though I was on for that. And it got me thinking, well, maybe it's a terrain issue. Well, this is my terrain looking towards Japan. It drops off very steeply, but not very far away is a big hill, and my antenna is really looking into the side of a hill. So is that changing my pattern at all? Well, I have a Yagi at 55 feet, which is about 17 meters. And if this was on flat ground, this blue line would show what my pattern looks like. Now, sporadic E is going to be mostly coming in between about 15 to maybe down 5-6 degrees as the angles that we can kind of expect it on 6 meters for sporadic E. Well, the red line here shows my vertical pattern towards Japan. And most likely we were getting openings down in this range. And you can see this thing is really terrible. We have a very bad null here. So I did some modeling, and if I put a dipole at about 9 meters, I would get this line here. So this is even a dipole at that low height would be better than a beam up higher at these angles that I'd probably need to work Japan. And then if I had put the 3 element at the same height, you could, as you would see, would get extra gain from the beam, which would help. But so it is possible that your antenna is too high. So back in July, I put up, I have a small tower that I had some 2-meter moon bounce stuff on, and it's only about 6 meters high. And I took that off and I put a 5-element Yagi. And here's the patterns towards Europe from the one I had been using compared to the other one. And you can see that there's a lot of angles here where the lower one worked better. Now, we only had one opening to Europe that I caught, and the lower one did work better. So the angle was probably in some sort of this range here. Where it was really playing well for me was in South America, where you can see that some terrible nulls down at this range here, but a better, fuller pattern in the range that we're looking at. And then actually most of the new countries that I picked up this year on 6 meters were to South America, and I attribute that to having a low antenna. I've never worked Australia, but I thought, what would that be like? And you can see that well, we aren't likely to get sporadic E to Australia. So I've never seen it. It doesn't seem to happen very often. But if we're lucky, as the sunspot cycle continues, we might get some F layer, maybe this winter, more likely maybe next winter. And at the lower angles, with F2 propagation, not with sporadic E, the higher antenna would be possibly a better antenna. So I definitely want to keep both of them, just depending on what kind of propagation modes that I'm using. So what happens when improving the takeoff angle from low? Well, here's a 10-meter dipole at what, about 18 meters. You can see we've got a lot of lobes here, because the higher you get, the more lobes you get. But you also get more nulls. And if we had a Yagi, here's a 15-meter Yagi at a little under 30 meters high, we get the more lobes and we get these angles. So if we want to get the low angle, we want to raise the antenna. Now, of course, that's not always possible. We have space and legal restrictions and other things, how much we can do with Yagi. So that, I'm sorry, tower height. So that may not be something you can do a lot with. But if you do have the ability, what the big guns do is they'll stack their beams on a tower. And let's take a look here. We've got, this are 10 meters, and the blue line is a Yagi, I don't know, a little over 10 meters high. And you can see this is the nice pattern right here. It catches all the angles, not so great in the low end. And it's pretty good at one of these openings here, which is only here in the peak. And if the red line is if we moved it up to 65 feet, or about 20 meters, and then we'll get this red line. Now we see we have 2 lobes because of the extra height. And we see we have a big null done in these openings. So if the opening was here and that was the only antenna we have, this wouldn't be very good. But if we phase the 2 together, we get this nice green line pattern, which covers pretty much all the angles. We get extra gain at some of them where the gain of both antennas adds up, but it basically we use the advantages of each of them. So if you can do that, stacking Yagis is a good thing. And I actually had this back in the early 1990s on 10 meters, and I really felt like I ruled the band, even with just a pair of 4 elements Yagis at a pretty modest tower. Another way to get low angles is with the verticals, and verticals are especially effective on the lower bands. I don't know about you, but I don't know many people that have 160 meter Yagis or a few guys that have 80s, but they seem to have trouble keeping them up. Now, verticals, of course, don't have a lot of gain, but if we've seen before, if the gain is in the wrong direction, wrong takeoff angle, it doesn't really do us a lot of good. So even though the gain might be less, having it to lower angles can be an advantage. Now, this is some plots of 80 meters to W9, from W9 landing to Europe. And we have some dipoles at 3 different heights, about 12 meters. Not sure what I do with it. Maybe 50 something, I don't know. And then, or no, not 30. 120 is about what, 35, 37 meters high. So you can see with the low dipole that we're not really going to be doing much DXing down here because these low angles it's going to be really negative gain. If we raise it up, we're going to get some extra coverage on these lower angles, and then we get more gain over the whole pattern up to in these 25-degree range. And if we go up even further, so around 37 meters or so, that's a pretty good covering all the different angles. But that's pretty high, and probably most of us don't have the ability to go that high unless you have some really tall trees and there are some towers. But if you put up a vertical, you can see what the pattern is. Now, HFT only works with horizontal antennas, so I had to go through and hand plot this in yellow. It's a little hard to see, but you can see that our vertical is down around here is just pretty much equivalent to the dipole up at around 37 meters, and it's better than the medium level dipole quite a ways, and it's always better for DXing on the than the lowest dipole. But of course, when we get further out, if we're talking about local communications, then the dipoles might be better because of the higher angle of radiation. So what if we want to improve our angle for the short ranges? Because we want to talk to our friends that are, not too far away, but outside of ground wave. Well, as we mentioned before, the critical frequency, the frequency of a signal going basically straight up and comes back down, is pretty low. So we're going to have to do this on the lower bands. Putting your 10-meter dipole or 10-meter vertical at 5 feet is not going to really help you work the close stations. Take a look at some 40-meter dipoles at some different heights. Here's one at about 12 meters, which is a pretty common height for a dipole. We can see that it's pretty much at a pretty high angle. 54 degrees is the maximum, and above that. So this is going to be pretty good for regionally local stations. If we raise it, or lower it down around 7 meters or so, we can see that we have even higher angles, and we will get more gain vertically. And if we were to look really low, just a few meters, a couple of meters, you can see that it's pretty much straight up. The maximum gain is straight up, and it's going to be a higher gain. Now, for our field day, for about 30 years, I was a 40-meter CW specialist, and that was what I did. I played around a lot of different antennas, and trying to cover all the angles. And I found that the dipole for me from this location at 27 feet was, about 8 meters was the optimum for us to get to the population centers of the East Coast, where we made most of our contacts during the day. I also had a vertical, some elevated radials that I used for working the West Coast of the United States at night. But I started playing around with something called the NVIS, near vertical incident skywave type of an antenna. which is a dipole at about 8 feet. And I found that was very effective out to range about 250 miles. I was able to work stations that I couldn't hear on the vertical and were just barely audible on the higher dipole, but I was able to easily hear them and work them then with the low dipole. Now, there's a problem with low dipoles. In free space, they're up around 70 ohms or so for the impedance, which is not too bad of a match for a 50 ohm system. And if it's a little bit lower, or you make it more like an inverted V, then the impedance will get closer to 50. But if you lower that to about 8 feet, your impedance is going to be about 12 ohms, which is not a very good match. So I use a folded dipole, which has an impedance around 280 ohms. And by bringing it down to the ground, the impedance dropped to about 50 ohms. Now, if you're not familiar with a folded dipole, it's just really the same length as a regular dipole. Some people think they're smaller because it's the name folder, but it's actually the same length as a regular dipole. Here's a picture and a drawing of this. I built one for our local, for field day and for our amateur radio emergency service use if we ever needed to have regional communication. And you can see some more information on this on my personal website, W9XT.com. It's made with some PVC T as a center insulator. I use twin lead. It's shorted at the ends, and then one of the wires is cut. It's fed with coax. I have some military masts that telescope, so this thing's all portable, and I just put it up, and then I found we need to have some wires on the ground. The literature, most of them had 5 wires to get the thing to work properly. As I mentioned, I live on a big pile of sand and rock, so it's not a very good ground. I found I need to put 7 to get some suitable matching. But one year when I did it at field day, we had gotten a lot of rain, and it was really wet and marshy and squishy when I was setting this up, and I put 3 wires up and tested it, and it was fine. So how many you need just kind of depend on the local ground conductivity. Now the reflector wires are nothing special. They're just, you know, a couple of meters longer than the dipole. They're spaced about a meter apart. They're not connected to the ground or anything. They're just, I have some wooden pegs that hold the ends in place so they stay straight in place. That's pretty much all they are. But this can be a very effective antenna if you're interested in the high angles for local communication. So as a contester, I really want to hit all the angles. I want to work the DX, so I want to work the low angles. I want to work the local guys, so I want the high angles. So a few things you can do, and really the best thing is to have multiple antennas. I try to have at least 2 different types of antennas per band for the contest bands, and they don't have to be, you know, big ones. And if I got a Yagi, you can maybe a dipole or a vertical, or if you use a vertical, putting a dipole up or something like that can make a big difference. Some of the big guns will, you know, put up a small fixed tri-bander from here to the Caribbean, because there's a lot of good multipliers there, and it's a fairly short distance, so it's a high angle. And of course, they also put up low dipoles for domestic contests, even though they might have very tall towers. So I used to believe you can't have too many antennas, but KL7AJ wrote a book which is kind of interesting. He did have a caveat that unless they're so close that they interact, and you have one antenna with multiple feed points. Now, a few caveats here. You know, we have to be a little bit careful. If your modeling says you should put this thing up at you know, 9.873 meters, you know, it doesn't have to be that close. Nothing's absolute. We also have to consider how accurate is the model. The model may not be perfect. What about the accuracy of your input data? If your terrain data isn't quite correct, or your ground conductivity changes, and also interaction with other metal objects can affect the pattern. So use this as a guide, but don't try to get 10 digits of accuracy out of it. Excuse me. So in summary, the signals are over a lot of different angles, and it depends on where you're trying to work them, the time of the day, the season, the band, solar condition, a lot of different factors. But if you can match your antennas to the angles the signals are going to be coming in, you're going to have more success. And height and local terrain can have a big effect on your antenna pattern. Verticals and verticals are going to be a good way to get the low angles on the lower bands, and NVIS are good for high angles. And there's some tools that are available that you can use to do your own analysis. But like I said, don't expect it to be perfect and exact, and don't let the enemy or the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just put something up and give it a try and have a lot of fun. So that said, are there any questions?
Well, I think we've got a few points, actually. Thank you very much for that, Gary. Concise, but really, the detail there. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us have thought about antennas, and we know about height's always important, but maybe we haven't given enough thought to the angles. So it's a really good thing to think about. We've had a few points, really, rather than questions, but this is a great time. If you've been watching this and you've got any suggestions, comments, feedback on maybe things you've done, or questions for Gary, then please ask them right away. Let me see. Andy M0NKR says, if you want to see what your terrain is like from your QTH, he recommends this website. So if you've got a pen and paper handy, you may want to write this down. It's www.heywhatsthat.com. So that's spelt HEYWHATSTHAT.com. Hey, what's that? All as one word. And that will show you where you'll hit the hill and everything else. So that's a very useful tip. Thank you very much for that. I don't think any other points really from that. I was going to ask about the size of it as well as the antennas. You've mentioned things like dipoles and things. But for example, I'm not, by the way, a great radio amateur in terms of my station and things isn't brilliant. But I've recently had a lot of success with an end-fed half wave. And I wondered, does it apply to that, where you've just got basically a single wire?
Yeah, I haven't played with that. So it's on my list to play with one of those, but it's really going to be how you mount the thing. I know some people have got them, like I said, inverted L, some have them straight vertically. I've known people that had one. There's a guy locally that has, like, I think the feed point is just outside of the second story of his house, and it goes over a tree, and then it goes down to a fence. So the orientation of the wire is going to have a big effect on the pattern. Yeah,
thanks. I mean, I knew that the height was fairly critical, and I was told by one of our antenna gurus, Steve G0KY, not to try an optimum height, and that the middle is the main bit where all of the energy comes out of as well. But I just wondered about the angle, because it is certainly an angle where I've got it from coming from a mast and then down to more of a sort of a long stick on the ground. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I've got Rodney G0CBO says low heights on 40 meters seem to work fine for him. Not a serious. He says he's not a serious DX chaser, but on CW it works very well.
Yeah, at low heights and on 40 meters, it's going to be very effective for regional type contacts. Now, if you wanted to talk reliably to Australia from the UK, then that's probably not the best antenna, but certainly working around the UK and into Western Europe, a low dipole on 40 can be very effective.
So what's your favorite antenna then? What does Gary's ideal station consist of?
Oh, I don't have enough money for that, but big towers and stacks would be nice. I have 3 towers, one next to the house, which is about 18 meters, and I've got another one which is a little higher, about 20 meters, which is away from the house, and then the short one. But I have a lot of receive antennas, and I'm a contester, and I try to have multiple antennas for each band. I do for all the contest bands. I have multiple Yagis for 10, 15, and 20 on different towers. For 40, I have a a dipole and a 2-element Yagi. For 80, I have dipole and shunt fed. 160, all I have is inverted L, but that's a very effective antenna with a good radio system.
And what about, I mean, where you are? You know, I'm lucky enough to live reasonably in the country here. We don't suffer too much from noise, but lots of people, you know, do have a lot of QRM from things like VDSL and internet and things. For you, have you found any antennas are better for immunity from those than others, and yet still do their job?
I spent a lot of time looking for this property. It's 14 acres, and I've been here about 30 years, but it's gotten more built up than it used to be, and the noise levels has gone up. I don't have any broadcast stations. There's one broadcast station that's well, I don't know, 7-8 miles from here, but they're low power and they're only allowed 500 watts. So that's not a problem that some people have with broadcasts on like 160 or 80. But the noise level, I think, is going up from things like digital devices. I know my noise floor is gone up considerably since I came here. I know some of it's in the house, and I got to go through and track some of that stuff down. Once in a while, I get something really bad. One time I was wiped out by my wife's charger for a cell phone. I know one thing that's a concern here in the United States. They're talking about the wireless charging of electric vehicles. And when you start talking 10, 15 kilowatts of energy pumped into a battery by, you know, induction, the harmonics from that, you know, were some pretty big signals.
Yeah, I think that electric charging of vehicles, or wireless charging, is a big worry over here as well. And probably just like the States, you know, they're becoming much more popular. I think, in fact, is it 2 in 5 cars or something like that sold now, new cars in this country are electric. So these sort of things are going to be, they're going to try them. But yeah, I don't know. I think some things it's better just to plug it in, and hopefully that'll be one of those things.
Yeah, that's my thinking, because, you know, even though they're pretty efficient, if you lose 5% of 10 or 15 kilowatts, that's a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
And
And
I
it's
know
going
you
somewhere,
guys
isn't
are,
it?
and you guys I know are in a real problem with energy. It's getting
Yeah.
expensive. You don't want to be wasting that. That's my thought anyway.
Yeah.
Besides the RF interference.
Absolutely with you on that. Thank you. Roger G3RDI says, have you modelled an NVIS dipole on 80 meters with a reflector on the ground?
I have not. I do want to put one up for 80 for domestic. I got a lot of things in the list, and that just hasn't risen up that high. But it'll probably be about twice as high, I would think, just, you know, as a 40-meter one. When we talk about height, we really aren't talking, you know, how many meters above ground. We're actually more interested in how many wavelengths, because that's where you get the effect of the extra takeoff lobes and the nulls.
Yeah, and Dick G3WRJ has made a comment as well. Says you can get surprising good performance from a poor antenna by picking the best time of day for a particular DX direction. But he says not for contests though, where especially you've got to work in defined times.
Yeah, like I said, it depends on the time of the day, and we showed the takeoff arrival angles over the different paths that, you know, those will change through the course of the day, you know, and it'll be wider range if it's like the high sunspot cycle. But if we have low sunspot cycle, then the openings will be shorter and they'll tend to be at the lower angles. But at the peak, we you know, have longer opening and cover more different angles. And it's possible to get multiple openings, or to get different 2 or more different paths. We have a 3-hop and a 4-hop happening at the same time.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think that exhausts our questions and things. But Gary, you've really made us think, I think, because we've had lots of talks over the years on antennas, the types of antennas. And as I said at the beginning, we've all got used to the height. We know if we can get it, the height's good, important. But probably a lot of us don't pay enough attention to things like the angles. So it's really made us think. Just before you go, you did mention briefly your website earlier on, but I know there's a lot of useful information on there, and it's W9XT.com.
Yes, that's my personal website.
And that's got some of the projects and things that you've worked on as well, hasn't it?
It's got a lot of stuff. I'm in the gardening and tropical fish and other things, so there's a lot of different things, but it's all at W9XT.com. And just go into the ham radio section. You can see some of the different projects that I've done and other information.
Lovely. Well, Gary, thanks ever so much for joining us tonight. I'm sorry that we had you had a little bit of a wait before we brought you in, but
Not
there
a
was quite a
problem.
bit of news. But it's lovely to see you, and thank you very much for the talk tonight.
Well,
That's
thank
Gary.
you. I really had a good time.
Good, great. Thank you very much, Gary, W9XT. Thanks. And there we are. And Gary's talk brings us almost to the end of NARC Live for this week, although we have had a couple of other comments, not to do with Gary's talk. One here, I've got to try and get this to you. This is about this weekend, I believe. Mike G4DYC says that Exercise Blueham is on 60 metres this Saturday and Sunday. You can contact the military cadet call signs, and this is the address, alphacharlie.org.uk, alphacharlie.org.uk. And one other comment I think I saw on here. Oh yes, Bob G6PWS, who we saw his lovely pictures earlier on, and we were too ignorant to know, even though I did join the family to the RSPB earlier on in the year. Shows we don't read the books, Mo. He said that the birds are a jack snipe and a little egret. Sorry that this got missed off the original message. Well, thanks very much for that. Thanks to you as well for joining us. Just to quickly tell you again what's happening this week at the club. So this Saturday we've got the Koblenz Sked at 9:30. Remember, it's half an hour earlier than usual on 7.123 megs. Hopefully working Marco Maritime Mobile. On Sunday we've got the GB Tourist News on GB3MB at 7 o'clock. 7:30 on Monday, we've got also the Monday Night Net on GB3MB, and at 8:30 the 80 metre CW net on 3.543 megahertz. And then next Wednesday, 26th of October, it's at the school, but remember it's at that room right at the back, so keep driving, go round to the back of the school at the Elgin Centre, and we're meeting for CW Forever, a celebration of all things Morse. Bring your Morse keys, bring your paddles, or come and watch and look at what everybody else has got and experience new things as well. And then the following Wednesday after that, it's the tabletop sale. But I'll bring you more details of that nearer the time. But for now, from Tammy M0TC.
Bye-bye.
And from me, David G7RP. Take care of yourselves, look after each other. Bye-bye.